KC9VKV, go ahead, Jim, K1CZL.
Yes, sir. Is the gentleman complete with his traffic?
Yes, sir. Is the gentleman complete with his traffic?
Nothing heard. And good afternoon, everyone. This is Kilo Charlie 9 Victor Kilo Victor. My name is Jim, and this is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog network. This is a directed network, and I am net control. If at any time during this net should an emergency arise, please notify net control, and we'll stand by and allow those in need to access this frequency. Is there any priority or emergency traffic at this time? And hearing nothing, we will continue. This net is all about ham radio and being all that you can be. That's what our Qso-Vlog network is all about, trying to help people achieve the best sounding station possible. Thanks for dropping by. FYI, my background is 50 years in commercial broadcasting, where a lot of big bucks are spent on audio processing equipment and getting it set up correctly to get the best sounding station possible. Long story short, when I became a ham radio operator, I could hear immediately a large discrepancy in on-air technical proficiency. A lot of stations were running with very poor mic equalization, very muddy with little articulation. And as I continued to work stations, I realized most of the stations were also running very low average peak modulation, many around 30% of average peak modulation. So with my background, I felt I could help, or at least try. I knew that most modern-day ham transceivers did have enough onboard processing equipment to be able to overcome most all of the problems, so it would just be a matter of developing a generic dynamic range setup procedure and then adjusting the onboard EQ gear. And so I started the Qso-Vlog network with the phrase, if you have a radio you want to check out, give us a shout. And today we're currently featuring over 2,700 Qso-Vlog Aircheck recordings. And you can access these recordings by going to YouTube and doing a call letter search for KC9VKV followed by the word logbook. That's Kilo Charlie 9 Victor Kilo Victor followed by the word logbook. And we also have a newer series called KC9VKV Highlights. That's Kilo Charlie 9 Victor Kilo Victor followed by the word highlights on a YouTube search. These are some of our less technical and more human nature philosophical kinds of QSOs. That's KC9VKV followed by the word highlights on a YouTube search. Both KC9VKV Logbook and KC9VKV Highlights are segments of our main YouTube homepage of Jim's Radio Story, where we celebrate a 50-year career in commercial broadcasting. A 50-year journey from a 5-watt pirate radio station as a 12-year-old to production director of a major 50,000-watt AM broadcast facility. And the thing that makes this truly a unique story is that I have all the actual masters from all along the way. Over 2,600 shows, including many full-length major music concerts and radio documentaries. You'll have to check it out and subscribe. Jim's Radio Story on a YouTube search. Our mission statement for the Qso-Vlog network is to establish a higher technical level of radio transmissions of the human voice by the intelligent utilization of available electronics in current amateur radio transceivers. Our setup, while generic in nature, converts the average 10 dB dynamic range transmitter with an average 30% of peak modulation to a much fuller 3 dB dynamic range with an average 80 to 85% of peak modulation. This substantial boost in audio transmit level is extremely beneficial in high noise levels and heavy QRM. It allows you to punch through when others fail. The second part of our transmitter setup has to do with proper mic equalization. We're looking to optimize the transmitted voice for a higher degree of intelligibility through the use of EQ patterns that bring out the articulation aspects of the human voice. Again, why need to hear the voice if you can't understand the words? Also this afternoon on the receive side, we're running 5 Internet SDR receivers, monitoring New York, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Virginia specifically, and in addition, we're running our new number 5 5 Hocus Pocus Internet SDR receiver loaded with 50 additional pre-programmed Internet SDR locations spread out over 20 states across the eastern half of the United States, trying to get the best copy from our 100-watt friends. Now, the audio from these 5 SDR receivers comes up on a 6-position rotary selector. Also on this selector is our local receiver audio. And today, our local receiver is running 3 large 10-foot vertical magnetic loop antennas, one aimed at 0 degrees, one aimed at 90 degrees, and the number 3 is aimed at 134 degrees. These are run as a directional scanner array with a manual voting system 6-position rotary selector. Also today on the transmit side, we'll be running our NOSWR specially oriented resonant tuned dipole antenna. One leg of this resonant tuned dipole antenna runs broadside to Montreal, Canada. The other leg runs broadside to Miami, Florida. As we were constructing our station, our mantra was 20 over from Montreal to Miami with a hotspot through the Carolinas. And although conditions may vary, the general performance of this antenna supports its mission. Also today, we'll be running our input source indicator, so when we switch from an Internet SDR receiver to our local receiver, you'll be able to see the switch and hear the switch. You'll have to check it out on our YouTube Qso-Vlog video. And as we come together for another Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog network, let us pause just a moment for the amateur radio operator's prayer. Lord, we pray for clear 20 over S9 communications today. Let all our transmissions fill the air and reach their destinations QSA5 to be understood by all. And as we pray for good radio conditions, let us also pray for good human conditions. During this time of pandemic that has challenged us all, we pray that you'll protect everyone, especially our elderly. And also, Lord, we seek your divine intervention to bring peace to a very divided United States. As we go through a very conflicting time in America's history, with dark clouds all around, we pray that you'll reduce life's daily political QRM between our brothers and sisters. And through your love and guidance, show us the way to find peace and harmony. Help us to communicate with one another 20 over S9. Thank you, Lord, and God bless and protect America. Amen. To continue, since this part of the band has many nets trying to operate in a very confined area, I would appreciate all stations checking into our Qso-Vlog net to keep their bandpass to no wider than 100 to 2900. And again, please, no wider than 100 to 2900. This is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog network. And now let's check in and see if Charlie K1GZL is on frequency to bring us up to date on the latest 40-meter band propagation. Charlie's QTH is up north in northern New Hampshire, near the Canadian border. Charlie, got a copy?
Near the Canadian border. Charlie, got a copy?
Yes, Jim, very good. You're running an S5 up to S9 direct, as I do not have capability of an SDR, but you're doing very, very well on a beautiful sunny day. Temperature all the way up in the upper, about 67 degrees, and the low this morning was 42. The normal low is 40, the normal high is 60. Up here at 2,030 feet on the Canadian border of northern New Hampshire. Back to you, Jim, and see how you copy. I don't know if you can use Milford or not, but I'll turn it to you. Go ahead, K1GZL.
Roger, Charlie, I finally made it out of the queue into Milford, so I'm copying you through Milford at about 35 over, Roger.
You're through Milford at about 35 over, Roger.
Okay, thank you very much on that. Here's a little bit of not Captain Mike, but Roy, VK7ROY, a little continuation of that. As the band on 20, I tried it a couple of months ago, and the temperature on the band was totally dead. There was nothing on 20. But here's a little bit of what I recorded a week ago. However, this is later in the QSO, and I believe I also do have Ian on down near Melbourne, Australia. So here it is. Let's see if it works.
I'm glad you got up and said hello. Good to say hello to you, mates, and absolutely cracking signal. Look after yourself, Charlie. Enjoy your day ahead of you. Enjoy your day, and hope we can do it again soon. Kilo Golf Zulu, Golf Zulu Lima, VK7ROY. Thank you, Charlie.
Okay, now he was only running 100 watts.
Yourself, Charlie. Take care. Hope to catch up again soon. Kilowatt 1, Golf Zulu Lima, VK7ROY. Bye-bye, Charlie. What a wonderful surprise, Charlie. I've been fond of you today, actually, and I thought we must try and do another contact with Charlie, and here you are. So, very good morning, Charlie. We've had a warmest day since last summer today. It was 18 degrees. 18 degrees. We've had a really cold winter here. Not quite cold like you have, but cold for us. Anyway, I wonder how you are, Charlie. You're sounding very good. K1GZL. Someone's just a moment, Charlie. With KN4 Germany Bravo Zulu VK3 Mike Oscar. You're peaking 30 over 9, Charlie.
Okay, I hope you copied that, Jim. KC9VKV, K1GZL.
Roger, Charlie, loud and clear. And that was Roy, Roger, down in Tasmania, or was it Australia?
Tasmania, or was it Australia?
Yeah, that last one was Ian down in Australia, and that was recorded on the same morning. I recorded Roy, VK7ROY, and Roy was only running 100 watts to a single quad loop, a wire quad loop. That's all he had, and 100 watts on the north side of the island of Tasmania. On the island of Tasmania, which is just a little bit south and east of Australia there, Jim. Go ahead.
Roger. Well, you really sounded good. What was your signal strength? Do you remember?
Yeah, he was 10 over 9. The noise level at that time was about an S4 to 7. However, that particular morning, our time, we had terrific static. There would be a terrific crash of static, and then it would relent. But as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, I tried 20 meters about 3 mornings ago, and the band was totally dead. And the only thing I worked on was on 40. I did work down on the North Island of New Zealand, but I could barely get him, and it took a long time just to get his name and whatnot, but he was 2, and the propagation that one particular morning was very poor, but I haven't tried it down in the South Pacific since then. Jim, go ahead.
Roger that. Well, good going there, Charlie. Appreciate it as always, and you have a real good afternoon and a great weekend up there. Roger.
Roger. Okay, 73. A pleasure. Always a pleasure, Jim, and keep up the good work that you do on trying to help your fellow amateurs with any new rigs and so forth. So you're an inspiration to a lot of people. So 7-3, and we will catch you hopefully next week. K1GZL, we are clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. 73 that way. This is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog Network. My name is Jim, better known in some circles as Dr. VKV, and we are recording now live till 5, so if you have a radio you want to check out, give us a shout. We'll post this recording up on YouTube in the next couple of days, so when you go to YouTube, just do a call letter search for KC9VKV, followed by the word logbook. That's Kilo Charlie 9 Victor Kilo Victor, followed by the word logbook. logbook, and that'll take you to our YouTube Qso-Vlog page, where we're currently featuring over 2,700 Qso-Vlog Aircheck recordings. This recording will be cut number 1 in that series. So now, without further ado, let's open it up and see who's out there. This is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog Network. If you have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout.
How much do you make off YouTube videos?
I make nothing, sir. This is not monetized. Any station needs assistance with their setup, give me a shout.
Any station needs assistance with their setup, give me a shout.
Oh, really?
This is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog Network. From now until 5, we record live and then post it up on YouTube so you can hear what your radio sounds like at the beginning of our setup and what it sounds like at the end of our setup. So there you go. This is KC9VKV.
This is KC9VKV.
And time for another thrilling edition of Adventures in Radioland. This segment, our Hocus Pocus new SDR receiver system, subtitled, look, Ma, the cat's meow. For a long time now, we've been running 4 dedicated Internet SDR receivers, monitoring New York, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, and trying to get the best copy from our 100-watt friends. And now we're introducing another giant step forward, introducing our new Hocus Pocus SDR receiver system, featuring an additional 50 SDRs, including spread out over 20 states. That's 50 SDRs spread out over 20 states and the eastern half of the United States. This Hocus Pocus Internet SDR receiver system will be used as a fox hunt type of receiver operation, always looking for the hottest signal possible, because we believe receiver options is the name of the game. And our new Hocus Pocus Internet SDR receiver is another giant step forward in trying to get the best copy from our 100-watt friends. This is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog Net. If you have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout.
If you have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout.
And we've had quite a few folks down in Georgia and Tennessee trying to get a hold of us of late, and so I'm going to go to our Tennessee SDR. Let me get that under control here. It'll be just a second. This is on our Hocus Pocus system. We have 20 states and about 3 SDRs per state, 50 to 60 SDRs. And we have in Tennessee, I think we have 3, and Knoxville is really pretty hot. So we're going to our Knoxville SDR. If you're down towards Georgia, Florida, around through there, this is KC9VKV Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog Network, looking towards Georgia and points south from there. Boy, this one is such a nice SDR. Anybody down in Georgia, Florida, Alabama, around through that way, Tennessee? And now we're back up towards Pennsylvania, on Milford, Pennsylvania. Anybody up north, this is KC9VKV.
Anybody up north, this is KC9VKV.
And time now for another thrilling edition of Adventures in Radioland. Hasty Decisions number 5, subtitled The Station Fire. Well, as you know, this Hasty Decisions series is all about the downside to hasty decisions. So Hasty Decisions 5, The Station Fire, actually begins in 1968 at WFBS Radio in Spring Lake, North Carolina. One of the additional carrots my competitor, General Manager Jerry Oakley, had dangled in front of me at our coming on over to his side recruitment luncheon was the opportunity later of becoming Group Production Director for the Radio Smiles broadcast chain of 6 stations. Well, his recruitment luncheon was successful, and after some time working for his station, WFBS, I did in fact become Radio Smiles Group Production Director. But I still did special productions for WFBS, Jerry's station in Spring Lake, which was located about 15 miles away from where I lived in my home in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I had my own recording radio production facility, which included a VHF remote-to-station link system so I could transmit my audio productions directly to the station without having to drive all the way there. And another item I had on my home studio was a remote broadcast radio monitor system. It received only the WFBS radio on-air signal, and many times I would have it on just to hear what the guys were up to on the air. So, well, a long story short, one Saturday morning in February of '69, I was in my home studio doing some writing and listening to the station, and when I became aware that the station had gone quiet, there was no music, no announcer, well, I thought maybe the station had gone off the air. So I went over and looked at the meters on the remote monitor, and the meters indicated that the station was still on the air. There was just no audio. Well, this was very unusual. I grabbed my two-way radio hand mic and called for the station control room. No answer. This was also extremely unusual. Something definitely was wrong. So I jumped in my car and headed for the station. When I was still a mile or so away, I could see a column of black smoke rising up from the direction of the station. When I got closer, I realized the station building was ablaze, with fire trucks all around. The main fire seemed to be right where the control room was. I went to the back of the building where 3 or 4 employees were standing, and I asked if they had managed to get any of the equipment out. They said they had not. I knew that after the fire, without any equipment, it would be very difficult to function. I hastily devised a plan, and there's that word again, hasty. I knew there were 2 production rooms to the back of the building, and that the back door opened into a hallway that separated the 2 production rooms. I thought I could get some equipment out if I went in through the back door, go down the hall a short way, feeling for the studio door on the left, and opening the door and go forward and slightly to the left, and there should be a portable Ampex 605 tape deck on the console. Well, I got to the door. I felt for heat. It was cool, so I opened it. The hallway was dark and full of smoke. I took a deep breath and headed down the hallway, feeling for the left studio doorway. I found the door was cool. I opened the door and took my bearings. I moved into the room. Within a second or two, I had found the tape deck, unplugged the connection cables, and started for the door, being very deliberate to retrace my footsteps exactly. I had taken only a couple of steps when all of a sudden something spun me around. Unfortunately for me, the engineer had recently added an additional ground strap to the machine. When it had run out of slack, it spun me around, and now I was deep in trouble. I was no longer did I have an exit point of reference. Well, I was still going to try and save the gear. I madly worked the ground strap back and forth where it was attached to the machine. Finally, it broke free, and I was headed for the door. But where? I felt along the wall until I found the door, and with no air left, I hit the hall and was out the back door, holding ever so tightly to that Ampex tape deck. Ah, light and sweet air. Thank you, Lord. This has been another thrilling edition of Adventures in Radioland. This segment, Hasty Decisions 5, subtitled The Station Fire. I look at now at hasty decisions can be very dangerous side effects, especially as it relates to working on or operating electronic equipment. So there you go. Hasty Decisions 5, the Station Fire. This is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog net. If you have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout.
Vlog net. If you have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout. Very stupid to enter a burning building.
Sir, would you repeat your comment, and where are you, so I might get a better copy? I don't have a real good copy on you.
Your comment, and where are you, so I might get a better copy. I don't have a real good copy on you.
Would that be a transmission without a call sign? I don't know.
Would that be a transmission without a call sign? I don't know.
This is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog net. If you have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout.
Vlog net. If you have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout.
My Elmer had mentioned that he might drop by today. I don't know if that's going to be or not. Never know. This is KC9VKV, the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog net. If you have a radio you want to check out, give me a shout. We record now live till 5.
You want to check out, give me a shout. We record now live till 5.
And no copy at the moment. This is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog net.
This is the Friday afternoon Qso-Vlog net.
There's some traffic way back in there, sir. I'm not sure what your call sign is, but you are only about a half a dB above my noise level, and I do not have a copy on any of the other SDRs. Try it one more time.
SDRs, try it one more time.
Well, been around the horn a couple of times, heard nothing, so gosh, maybe nobody needs service this afternoon.
So gosh, maybe nobody needs service this afternoon.
Well, it looks like we'll be going fishing there, so we'll say 73 all if there's anybody listening. Apparently no work to be done here, so we're going to take off and go fishing. 73. This is KC9VKV, returning this frequency back to normal amateur radio use. KC9VKV is clear.
Back to normal amateur radio use. KC9VKV is clear.
Hello, this is Jim, KC9VKV, and sometimes we're known as KC9VKV Bicycle Mobile. And a lot of people have requested to have some video made of the mobile bicycle that we ride in the morning in the park between 8 and 10 usually. So we thought we would accommodate. So this will be about our bicycle mobile. This is basically just a mountain bike with a little special handlebar adaptation of radio equipment. What we have here is a pedestal, PVC pedestal, that goes all the way down into the, as far as it can go. Let me get around here so I can show you. It goes down there, two PVC pipes that come up, and then the radio is mounted. There's a Velcro strap, and the radio is clipped onto the Velcro strap. Now, it used to be that the Velcro strap went across the front of the radio, but the problem was then you couldn't get to the controls very easily. And so then we just decided to do the strap and clip the Bofang to the strap, and that worked out a lot better. Now we also have another radio down below for other communications purposes, but this is the main one we use, and the actual advantage, the best part of the system is the antenna. Now this is a very special antenna. It gives us 3.5 dB gain on VHF and 6 dB gain on UHF, and that used to belong to Lu2 N9 GTO, but it's a long story. He had the antenna and he had it mounted on his truck, and his wife came home and she took a look at it, and she said, "Get that gaudy thing off your truck. It looks like it was made by a band of gypsies." And it was primarily because of the red aspects to the antenna. Not many antennas have red as the main color, and so he gave me a call and he said, "You know, I've got this great antenna, but I can't use it because the wife won't let me run it on the truck. So maybe you might be able to use it. The only problem is that it's fire engine red." And I said, "Well, you know, that's not really a problem because my bike is fire engine red." So it all worked out. And before I had that antenna, I had a home-grown ground plane that was about the same height as this, and it had 3 radials, ground radials coming off from about this height here. And if you notice, it used to have 4, except when I got on the bike, I realized I had a ground radial in my eyeball, and so I did decide to delete one of the ground radials, make it 3, and space them such that when I rode the bike, I would not have a ground radial in the eyeball. It worked out pretty good, but it didn't have much gain, although I could use it on VHF and UHF, which is better than just a UHF or a VHF singular antenna. Now you might wonder what this is. This is, well, I had a little leak on the cover last night, and the sheet was a little wet, so we used a little Kroger bag with some towels underneath it, and that makes everything run a lot better. Underneath that we have, of course, the liquid supply for traveling, and then we have our world famous cheat sheet here. These are the various frequencies that we use as we're traveling about hitting the repeaters. What I was going to say is initially when I had my ground planed antenna,
I could only hit maybe 10 repeaters, but after Lou donated this antenna, I'm now hitting 18 repeaters from the pedway, so it's doing real well. Yeah, let's see here. I've got let's see. Underneath, I've got dual saddlebags. These are special Walmart $5 a piece lunch bags sewn together, and then just put over the adjustment for the handlebars there. And then let's see here. Oh, right there is the camera bag. And coming on over around front, I've got dual lights. This light here is a backup light to this light here, and that light is actually a Stanley 6-watt light, and they're all running off this power supply right there, and that's a rechargeable battery pack in there. And used to be I had this the Stanley light angled up higher, but and we rode a lot at night, and folks would see us coming, and we had it angled up, and they thought it was a train coming. The light was extremely bright. A 6-watt LED light is really bright. So we did after a while decide to angle it down. So we got it angled down where it's probably illuminating mainly at about 20 feet in front of us. Now also, here's a little addition we're carrying this morning, which is bread for our ducks. And we'll have, maybe we'll run into George, hopefully, and be able to, you'll be able to see George's characteristics. Now George is the enforcer of the group, and he keeps all the other ducks away as his buddies are trying to eat, but George himself will not eat, you know, given food, so you'll be able to see that. Anyway, this is the KC9VKV bicycle mobile. Had a lot of interest in us doing a video on that, so I figured, well, since we're in the park, this would be a beautiful time to do it. So when we're talking on the radio in the park, that's pretty much what we're riding. So there you go, the KC9VKV bicycle mobile. And that's Georgie right there. They're trying to get in on the food, but George is keeping them all at bay. That's George the duck. You've heard so much about George. Well, there he is. He keeps all the other intruders out of the group, but he will not eat any of the bread that I put out. He will let all of his buddies eat, but he will not, and he'll chase off any newcomers that try to get in on the feeding. So, all right, this is the local group here that George controls. There we go. One more tight of Georgie. Hi, Georgie. Hi, buddy. You're doing a good job. All right, you guys, we'll catch you later. KC9VKV bicycle mobile. Ready to miles for the cars. little liquid refreshment there, Roger.
Well, at least the first day to get a little sunshine for your outdoor extracurricular biking activities. Finally get some sunshine.
Roger, Roger. Well, I would have hoped to get a little heat along with the sunshine. Is that so much to ask?
I've got about 48 degrees on my car temperature indicator. I'll take that over 15 or 20, that's for sure.
Roger, roger that. Yeah, we managed to set a new record this year. Our former record was 17 degrees, and I think we did manage to get out there at about 11 degrees there one morning.
I think I'd have a hard time my joints settling on that. I saw something on Pinterest that I thought I'll bet you had looked like a C-shaped antenna that somebody had made and bent for, and then there was back-to-back. One was UHF and VHF, and they mounted it on their back of their bike. It was a nice-looking rig and setup, and it reminded me of you. I think you've got your Bofang, and I'm not sure what antenna you're running, though.
We're running a Lutu N9 GTO Special here. This is, when I tell this story, this is one that he had on his truck for a while until his wife saw it, and she said, "Get that daddy thing off your truck, it looks like it's made by a band of gypsies." And the main reason she said that was that it is a red antenna. It's basically fire engine red. So Lucy gave me a call and said, "You know, I got this antenna. It's really a nice antenna, but I can't use it. Would you like it?" And I said, "Oh, sure." He said, "You know, it does have a problem though. It's fire engine red." I said, "Not a problem. That's the same color as my bike, Roger."
Well, that worked actually rather well, and I was thinking for fire engine red or for visibility standpoint, safety first.
Oh, Roger. Well, they don't know exactly what to think of me as I tool down the footway. This antenna does, the tip of it is 7.5 feet off the ground. So it does have certain vertical aspects to it, you know. Although, I do have about 3 inches of clearance on the main shelter. So I don't have to lay it down. Now, the other shelters do not have that clearance, and I would have to try to lay it down a little bit to get inside those. But the main one here is, I guess it's 8 feet, so I have 3 or 4 inches of clearance on that one, Roger.
I was going to say that, or just a little bit of air out of the tires. Right. I take it you have a different type of kickstand. I tell you what, when the kids, some of the guys in our neighborhood were big on CB, what we ended up doing is put a whip on our bike and put the CB on it. We'd run around the neighborhood, get more distance because our handhelds didn't do the job, so we put a whip on it, got better distance. But whenever we tried to park our bikes, the whip would always knock our bike over.
Well, this only, I guess, is about 4.5 feet. Whereas some of those CB are like 9 feet. You know, they do tend to be a little top-heavy as things go. But this one is not that way, although in the past few days there has been quite a bit of wind. And I've got some homebrew saddlebags that I have mounted up on the handlebars, below the handlebars, and they do catch some wind. So I had to be very careful that I didn't get too far away from the bike because it was taking quite a bit of side wind, Roger. Roger, roger, Paul. Could you give me those calls in phonetics?
Kilo David 4, David Kilo Baker, KD4 DKV.
Roger, roger, Paul. I'm working on a video as we speak of the bike, and I did earlier shoot a little piece of descriptive of it, and then I did some video on the ducks, and I don't know if you ever heard about George, but George is a real special duck. So when I put this on, everybody will be able to see who George really is, and may have a little bit of our Qso on there with it. Roger, roger.
So you quack it out. Okay. KD4DKV. I'll be right back.
Roger, roger. 3's for the file, and we'll catch you later. KC9VKV, bicycle mobile, exercising for better health.
Alrighty, let's see, signal's still up?
Yep, sound great down here.
Great. And right now we're talking with Spike Odell from WGN fame. Spike, what I'm really interested in is how radio came to you as a child or as a young person. How did that come about?
Well, I always tell the story, and it's on my QRZ page too. When I was a kid, 9 or 10 years old, actually before that, my dad put a big shortwave radio in my bedroom at night upstairs because there was no place else to put it. So I turned that thing on and played with it and listened to people from all over the world, and I was taken by all those voices from overseas, and I just thought that'd be the coolest thing to be able to throw my voice out over the air and have somebody listen to it, and that's, I guess, kind of what started it all.
Roger, did you have an interest in, well, I know in my case, tearing things up and then fixing them electronically?
I did. I thought that was a very cool thing when I was a kid, to see somebody take a radio apart and have it in 115 pieces on the table, put it back together again and have it work. Unfortunately, I wasn't blessed with that ability. I was horrible. So I let somebody else do all the fixing, and I just stuck to the talking.
Roger, and tell me about your first paying job in radio.
My first job in radio was at a little station called WEMO in East Moline, Illinois. I just graduated from a little 6-week broadcast course at a vocation school. They gave you a certificate and a pat on the back, and they said, go get them. Go conquer the world of radio. So I tried to get a job, but everybody wanted somebody with experience. So I watched this little radio station being built in my hometown. My dad actually knew the general manager, so my dad kept saying, go down there, knock on the door. So I did. He wanted experience. So I went back a couple weeks later, and he says, no, we need experience. Come back when you've got some experience under your belt. So I thought, well, I'll never get that job. I listened to it go on the air one night. It was a Friday night. Went on the air about 6 o'clock at night. I listened to it all night long. And I went to bed that night. The next morning at 7:30, the phone rang, and the general manager says, you still want a job on the radio? I said, yeah. He says, if you're here in an hour, you're on the air. Boom! I was there. I went and did my first 8-hour shift, went home happy as a clam, and threw up.
Oh, Roger. Yes, I was going to ask you what the feeling was when you were on the air. I know great exhilaration, but at the same time, you know, you just don't want to mess up, Roger.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And you know, it wasn't my kind of station, if you will. I mean, I was playing Eddie Williams, Perry Como, and, you know, I wanted to play the Beatles, the Stones, but it didn't matter. I was on the air. I was getting some experience. That station also allowed me to work the boards. I worked the network for we carried the St. Louis Cardinals at that time, so I was a board op for that. And after about 7 or 8 months of working there, the guy came to me and he says, Spike, I'm going to have to let you go. And I said, why? What happened? He said, well, you didn't do anything. He says, we just don't have the money to pay you. We don't have any revenue coming in. I thought, well, and then I just asked him, I said, is it okay if I work here for free so I can get some experience? He said, you do that? I said, yeah, I'll work here for free. So he says, well, if you'd like to. So I worked another couple months there for free.
And that is the way it is when you get radio in your blood. You just, I know in my case, I had a little station in, Belglade, Florida, Pahokee, Florida. Things are hokey in Pahokee, but this was a town, I guess, of about 4,000 right in the southern part of Lake Okeechobee, and that's where I started. Well, where did you go after your first station there?
Well, I was working at the factory at that time. I was a security guard. I wore a little uniform like Barney Fife. So on the way to work one day, I had heard they needed a weekend person at a station up the street. So I stopped there on the way just to drop off a tape, and the program director heard my name outside of his office door, and he walked out. He says, "You're Spike O'Dell?" I said, "Yeah." He says, and here I am in my uniform and everything, and my lunch bucket, going to work, dropping him off a tape. And he says, you're looking for a job? I said, yeah. He says, can you be on the air tonight? And I said, well, I get off at 11. He says, good enough. You're on at midnight. So there's that story, too.
It's certainly is opportunity knocking and being ready to accept the challenge, Roger.
Oh, yeah. Just, have audition tape will travel. By the way, the rest of that story from my first job is when I went to work at WGN, my very first day up in Chicago, they show me in my office, and I open the door, and there's a big pile of mail already on the table. Letters and cards of well-wishing and all that stuff. And one of the letters I got was from my first general manager, who couldn't afford to pay me. He says, congratulations on your big job at WGN. Included, please find a $100 bill. I need to buy you dinner.
Oh, that's great. That is great. And also it indicates that you don't want to burn any bridges, as you go up the career ladder, because, it is a small world.
Never, ever burn a bridge, because the guy who fired you might be the guy who hires you the next time.
That's right. So now, when you first went to WGN, you were afternoon drive, or how'd that go?
Yeah, the legendary Wally Phillips was cutting back his schedule, and they just hired me to kind of fill in when Wally didn't want to work. Wally could kind of do his own thing. So Wally would work sometimes 2 hours in the afternoon, sometimes 1 hour. And when he didn't want to work, I had to fill in the rest. That's how my career at that station began.
Roger, and you were 13 years on the afternoon shift?
13 years on the afternoon shift until our morning man, Bob Collins, unfortunately was killed in a mid-air plane collision. I actually had the unfortunate job of announcing that on the air one afternoon, and the next morning I was doing his show and continued to do so for 9 years.
Roger, yes. And Steve and Johnny, now I first went, for WGN on a loop antenna. I had a loop antenna oriented just right that I could get WGN on one side and WSB in Atlanta on the other. And I became familiar with Steve and Johnny, and they dearly love you.
In the morning, I would always fill in for Bob anyway when he was on vacation. When I did the afternoon show, when he'd go, I did the morning show. So, forever and ever, I was coming in at 5 in the morning and relieving them. And they still are great friends. Steve, I used to listen to him when he was on WLS, long before I even knew I was going to be on the radio. He worked at WLS, did the 10 to 2 o'clock in the morning shift, I think is what it was. So, the very first time I ever called a radio station, it was his show. Little did I know we'd be working together.
Roger, yes, a beautiful couple there. Really enjoyed them. And so, what did you find the most difficult thing about the life in Chicago and big time radio?
Well, I remember big time radio going from a medium market to the second or third largest market in the nation. I remember being interviewed for the job by they had all the bosses there, the program director, the assistant, the general manager. They were all there, the sales manager. And I remember the big boss from upstairs on the 19th floor. He was there, and he says, Spike, he says, if you worked here, would you be intimidated? And I thought, what's the right answer here? How do I answer this? Do I be cocky and say no, or what? And I thought for a second, and I said, I am a little bit intimidated. He says, good, you should be.
Roger that. Roger that. I don't know how I would have answered that, frankly. I'd follow in your situation there, but the ratings, live and die by the ratings in a city like that, Roger?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there for a while it was every 3 months you'd get the ratings with the Arbitron, but then towards the end of my career, it was the PPMs, the personal people meters. And I was rated, I could go back and check my ratings for every hour of the day. Every day I was rated. So when you live and die by, a rating point, which is what so many people do, it's a little nerve-wracking sometimes. There's a little pressure, but fortunately, I was second place in the market overall for my time slot, 12 plus, 2 or 3 times over 22 years, but the rest of the time we were always number 1.
Roger that. Now, and also in a market like that, you had engineers that did all the board work, Roger?
Oh yeah, they wouldn't let me touch anything. I would sit there on my hands, and if I scratched my nose, they'd push a button.
Right. The only control you had was a cough button?
I had a cough switch, and I could punch up the people on the phone on the board in front of me. I could go to whatever line I wanted to. So that's the only thing I could do: a cough switch and phone line.
Roger. And what provoked you to decide to retire?
My wife and I, we always wanted to retire when we were age 55 years old. We always said that for years and years, for probably 20 years. So we made a conscious effort when we went to Chicago. And granted, the money was a lot bigger in Chicago than it was in a small town. So we took a lot of that money and invested pretty well. Put it in savings accounts, and we got it to the point to where we could actually retire at age 55. And the market was bad when I did, but we talked to the money people, and they said, yeah, if you're careful, you can do it. So we did. We pulled the plug. I said, I'm going to retire at 55. I told everybody that for years, and I did.
Super wise decision, man. Leave yourself some time to enjoy life. That's the thing about being on the air. You are responsible for every second that you're on the air, and that kind of stress can really get to you, Roger.
Oh, Roger, yeah, there's times where you don't sleep at night. I tell you when I was always lucky because talking and gabbing and just chitter chatter, I never ran out of anything to say. I went to detention in high school for that, and they ended up paying me money for that. But there were times where you felt the stress. When I went to the morning show, we had a meeting a couple of months after the morning show, and I was told that my morning show, the revenue for that show, was responsible for almost 40% of what money the station makes. I woke up in a cold sweat the next morning. 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't be stupid. I can't fail. And that scared me to death. That's when it all kind of sunk in on me.
Roger, I know even today I'll have, I don't call them nightmares, but I'll wake up in the middle of the night or I have dreams about being at a station and trying to find that next piece of music to get ready to put on the air. And unfortunately, I think most of my dreams, they're talk radio stations because I can't find music anywhere.
Yeah, I know what you mean. By the way, W4, WGN, for identification with KC9VKV.
Roger. We are speaking with the legendary Spike Odell from WGN fame, and we're listening to his actual ham radio. Tell me about your ham radio station, Spike.
First job where the guy couldn't pay me. I never got fired. I made it through. I should have been fired 2 or 3 times probably, but I never got fired. And everybody in this business usually does get fired a few times.
Roger, Roger. We might have doubled just a little bit there. I was saying we're speaking with the legendary Spike Odell from WGN fame. And Spike, tell us a little bit about your ham radio station.
Well, I'm a recent ham. After being retired here for 6 or 7 years, I thought, how come I'm not on a ham radio? I've always wanted to do that. I passed my code when I was a kid, so I went back and got my license about a year and a half ago. I got my general the first time, and then I went back and got my extra a couple months later. It's very modest here. I'm in an HOA situation, so I can't have a big antenna. I just got a little 87-foot wire that goes out of my ham shack window over to the top of a tree by the lake, Old Hickory Lake here in Middle Tennessee. And my ground wire is wrapped around a brick and thrown about 50 feet out into the water. I've got an Icom 7300 that I'm using now. I've also got a Yaesu FTX 1200. I power it up with a ALS 600, and my tuner is a MFJ 962D, so it's pretty modest, but it does a pretty good job for what it is, I think.
Roger, Roger. And the microphone you're using now?
The microphone is a Sennheiser 421-2.
Roger, Roger. Well, listen, I appreciate your time, Spike. Did a long time want to speak with you on the air and include you in the QSO segments, Roger?
Roger, hey, yeah. Always good to talk to a fellow radio geek. You know what? We can tell stories for hours. Half of them are lies, but who cares?
Exactly. Spike Odell, thank you, sir.
You bet, man. Thank you so much.
Here's where the situation is. When they found out I was blind, my dad told all my other brothers, you guys got 2 good eyes. You need to fend for yourself. We've got to work with Tom and, help him to develop. And, of course, they resented that. And that's probably the main reason they have nothing to do with me today, because my mom and dad gave me all the attention and affection they could possibly do it. Now, I didn't ask for it, but, that was just something that they did, Jim. So anyhow, I went to school in Columbus. I was in kindergarten, and at the School for the Blind back then in kindergarten, and I don't know how it was at KSB because I don't know anything about KSB, but it was basically an orientation year to get you away from home and to introduce you to life in a residential school for the blind. There were about 220 other kids there from all other parts of Ohio at the time. And many of them did not go home. Their parents didn't have the money, or some of them just didn't want the kids, okay? And so what happened was they just stayed, and the state took care of them. They got to go home on major holidays. So anyway, that was that. I finally got used to it. I would cry every time they'd bring me back every weekend, and my brother said, if you don't shut up, I'm taking you to the superintendent, and he has an electric paddle that he's going to use on you to shut you up, give you something to really cry about. Well, I shut up. And so that's what happened there, Jim. Well, kindergarten segued into first grade, and at that time we started learning Braille. And I didn't want to learn to read it because nobody that I knew read the stuff, I said, man, I want to read the books with the blank pages. See, I couldn't understand why I was different. Why couldn't I do what my brothers did? And the teacher tried to tell me, Tom, you can't do it. She says, here's a print book. Tell me what the page says. Tell me what you see. And so I just ran my hands. Well, I don't see nothing. She says, that's my point. There is print on there, but without sight, you can't possibly see it. So to make a long story short, I failed first grade. Like she told my mom and dad, Tom is memorizing things and not learning. So anyhow, the second year I was back before at OSSB, I thought, well, what can I do? What do I like to do? Well, radio, man, that's cool. So I started dialing around on the radio. I didn't understand a whole lot of things about why the dial was laid out as it was. Remember now, I was just a 6-year-old kid. And my babysitter at the time introduced me to a station in Dayton, WING owned by the Great Trails Broadcasting Corporation. I believe KLO in Louisville was owned them at one time. And I liked it, but the problem was at sunset, local sunset, they changed their pattern and lowered their power, and I would cry and cry and cry. You would thought someone died, and you know, we would visit people who lived in other parts of the county, and they would have WING, and I couldn't understand why they could hear it, and I couldn't hear it. So I said to Dad, boy, I wish you had moved to where we could hear WING all the time. And he said, well, son, I do well to keep a roof over your head now. And so he bought our place where we lived on Possum Road on the GI Bill back in '46. And so my interest in radio came. We had a local station, which I referred to, WBLY. And it went off the air at local sunset. It had an FM, but I didn't know much about FM. I thought you just changed the dial from AM to FM, and there it was. Well, I didn't learn the difference until the spring of '61, how the FM dial was laid out. And you know, back in the day, the FCC had a special table of allocations on the FM dial that where stations could only have an ERP of 3,000 watts horizontal and 3,000 watts vertical at that time. And so anyhow, in 1960, one brother got a job as a salesman for WBLY. And my first experience, they had a talk show on there, a guy named Smilin' Bob, Robert Yount, who was the CEO at that time of the Champion City Broadcasting Company. Let me identify. This is K4LID.
And KC9VKV, Tom, your signal is excellent. Stayed up all the way, no fades. I wanted to ask you, you were talking about when you were younger, did you have a conception of what the printed page was, or did you have any idea what it was, since you've never saw one,
No, I didn't, Jim. I had no idea. I didn't understand why I couldn't read it. All I could do was feel a blank page, and I thought, man, but then when I learned Braille there for a time, I said, man, why can't print be like Braille? And I can get into another discussion about how Braille is and why it has to be the way it is, but no. I had absolutely no conception of the printed page because, you know, in print, you can make the fonts bigger or smaller, but in Braille, you don't have that luxury.
Roger that. And so you went to the school for the blind, and how many years did you go to that school?
Well, I was there from September of '57 until June of '68, when I left there and went home to school to finish out my high school years at my beloved Shawnee High School in Springfield. Well, at the School for the Blind, they had started a radio club sponsored by CORS, the Central Ohio Amateur Radio Service. And there were two instructors that came to the school beginning in 1960. And what they would do, they would teach the code, and then they would also teach the theory. And the Columbus Amateur Radio Club gave the school a station. We had a Collins 75A3 receiver. We had a Central Electronics 200V transmitter, and we had homemade crystal-controlled transmitters for the novice band. And so they had switches, and we had Braille markings with a Braille label maker. When you turn the switch one way, like we had 37. At that time, the novice band was 3700 to 3750. And we had and the 40-meter band was 7150 to 7200 then. And so we got on the air as we could, but the administration kind of frowned on that. So it didn't happen, and I don't know what happened, since it was a volunteer thing. The guys from the radio club quit coming to school. Well, I decided in 1962, the last year that my dad was alive, that I wanted to learn the code. So a friend of mine, the same one who worked at WBLY, who basically was the CEO, the Champion City Broadcasting Company, of course, which is no more, has been gone. He was the one that ran the thing, and there was an attorney and a businessman in Springfield who were the three people behind WBLY. Well, there was a department store in Springfield then called Fashion Fair. And I'd gotten one of these Caravel sets or whatever it was, and it was I don't know what it really was, Jim. It was an AM radio with a little microphone. You could play radio, but it just didn't work right. Well, in the process, I got a 45 record of learning the Morse code. So the easiest letters for me to learn were S, H, and I. And I don't have to tell you what the last letter was. And I just, I thought, man, that is cool. So then I learned O. So, hey, man, what if you send SOS, 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 SOS? So I didn't put this in the article you read, but my brother made me mad one day. And I had heard that if you took a flashlight and you heard a plane go over, we live fairly close to the Springfield Municipal Airport. I heard that if you would take that flashlight, send SOS, SOS, the pilot would, might see it, or you could say hi, did it, and the pilot might wave his wings at you. So I got mad at my brother, and I said, I'll fix you. So I heard a plane, I took that flashlight for all I was worth and kept doing that. And there was another plane, and another, I kept doing that, Jeff. Well, I got bored with the game. And it wasn't about a half hour, 45 minutes later, the sheriff's department came out and said, we're looking for somebody who was sending code with a light. And a pilot thought he recognized the location. So I had some tall explaining to do about that. So anyhow, that was one of the things with the code that I did. And in 1965, we had a new industrial arts teacher, Starling Hutt, WH Quebec Echo Mike. And he did not know how to teach blind guys how to work with power tools and all that. He was afraid. And at the time, the school, because of the lack of funding then, could not get the teachers they needed with the expertise that would have been required, Jim. So, anyhow, I wasn't in the class. It was another class. Somehow he found out that we had a ham station and everything. And he said, well, what do you guys want to do? Learn industrial arts or learn ham radio? Yeah, we want ham radio, man. Forget about that old junk. So that's all we did, and if you got your license, you had an A the rest of the year, whether you did anything or not. You could sleep in the class, he didn't care. So anyhow, I learned the code. I had a hard time with that. And, A, da, B, da, did it, and all that. I said, man, I can't get it. So a buddy of mine says, hey, Tom, I know how we can do this, how you can learn it real quick. If we tell dirty jokes with the code, and we all people names and everything, son, you can get it. Well, he was right. I learned it overnight, and I passed my code test 2 or 3 days later. Well, that was okay, Jim, but the theory presented a problem for me, buddy, for the novice. And my test came in, and me and a bunch of guys, we took it on a cold, snowy January in '66. And I failed. My instructor said, and likens, you did stinking. So anyway, what happened was I said, man, I don't know how to fool with this. So anyhow, to make a long story short, I did get my novice ticket. But then I heard that, man, all the rigs you had to load and tune and dip the plate, and I knew I was in trouble. In the meantime, I had gotten into CB back in '63. Of course, my mother had to get the license because they would not issue me a call sign since I was less than 18. And so I thought, hey, man, CB's kind of cool. That's a whole other story. But anyhow, I was enjoying the heck out of it. I was in the junior CB club, the president of it, and really wreaking havoc with the CBers in Springfield and Clark County back in the day. I could write you a book on some of those things, too. We had CB jamborees that were like ham fests and coffee breaks at various restaurants and visiting different people's houses and stuff. That was really neat back then. So anyway, I passed my test, and I wanted a rig. Well, in Christmas of '65, we went down to Custom Electronics in Dayton. It was on Brown Street there by where the VA hospital is, a National Cash Register, and went in there and bought a Telekrafter SX120 receiver, which I didn't know it was just a communications receiver. It really wasn't a ham receiver. And it was hot on the broadcast band and mediocre everywhere else. You couldn't hear sideband on it. And on CW drifting and everything. So I got my license, and Mom said, well, you need a better receiver. So we went back and bought a Hammerlin HQ110. Well, back at that time in Springfield, Ohio, there was about a dozen radio stores there, Jim. We had Lafayette Radio, we had Eberly Radio, we had Standard Radio, we had R&R Communications, Biggs Electronics, Herb's Radio and TV. Everybody had some sort of ham radio stuff. DeVore Electronics in Enid, and all this, that was just so cool, man. It was the radio mecca, other than if you lived in Dayton or Columbus, because it was right between them. So anyway, the guy at the Lafayette store had this Heathkit DX20. Well, he said, I know you're going to burn this thing up.
So tell me about tube-type radios and how a blind person functions with that.
Well, everybody has their own way. At the time under discussion, I didn't know that there were any audible meters around, so to make a long story short, I got disgusted with ham radio and got out of it. I said, man, if you just have to load and tune, I said, I don't need ham radio, forget about it. Well, the exception to that rule was the Central Electronics 200V and the 100V, which you did not have to load or tune. That was a broadband transmitter made by Central Electronics, and it used bias batteries in it. They had another way to deliver the bias, and I don't understand how it all worked. So anyway, I just got out of ham radio when all this happened. And so then my interest started going into what would be my, I guess you might say my avocation, which was police communication. And when I was a junior in high school, actually it started before that, when I was a sophomore, a friend of mine had been elected sheriff of the county at that time, and I called him and said, man, I'd like to come down there and learn how to dispatch. So anyhow, it never got to happen until I was a junior in high school. I was the happiest kid in the world. Our sheriff at the time, who was Harold M. Bud Mills, who, by the way, was a bonus baby for the New York Yankees, and I didn't know that till he passed this last April. He had an anti-drug program that he put on in all the schools in Clark County then. And I was sitting down in front, and he came to me and he says, what are you doing this afternoon? I said, well, I'll just go home and just kick around on the radio, I guess. He said, well, why don't you come down and we'll talk about you coming to work. I'll tell you what, Jim, butter wouldn't melt in my mouth. I wanted the school day, and so I ran off the bus and told Mom I had to go to the sheriff's office. She said, what are you talking about? She'd been working in the yard and the garden. Well, I got to clean up, so she took me down, and they said they'd bring me back home. So in the meantime, I had been listening to the statewide sheriff's network, which at that time was on VHF low band, and it operated similarly to how the Kentucky State Police used 2 years ago. So I'd memorized everybody's call sign in the area, their numerical sequences and all that. And he and his chief administrator, J. Arthur Schumann, were impressed. So to make a long story short, I started working there that Saturday in April of 1970. And I learned real quick that a lot of what goes on never gets out on the air. And so I enjoyed that, but later on I had a problem of my own making. And so I didn't know any better, and I was just a young, immature kid when I look back on it. I said something on the radio that I shouldn't have said. I didn't cuss anybody out, but I demeaned their character over the air, literally. Well, that was my undoing, so when I was told not to come back, I said, does the sheriff know about this? And the sergeant said, I don't know, and I don't care if he does or not. So I went home and told Mom about it, so my mom, who's always been my #1 defender, called every deputy she could find and said, has my son ever done anything or said anything to offend you? Because if he does, and if he did, he will apologize. I'll drag his sorry butt down there and he'll straighten it out. And one of my friends on another shift, Jim Harper, said he's one of the nicest young men I've ever met. He says, it's these other guys that are the problem. So I called the sheriff Monday and I told him, I asked him if he'd heard about it. He said, yeah, I heard a little bit about it. So I explained my side and he said, well, you come back down this next weekend and we'll iron it out. So that Saturday I went back down and I was walking through there and all of a sudden that sergeant started to speak and the sheriff came through and he said, Sergeant Posey, Tom's going to dispatch on the weekend. You've got stuff to do out in the cruiser. Well, that was okay, Jim, but the deputies gave me a cold shoulder. They wouldn't do anything for me. You know, if they were going to eat someplace, I'd have them get me something and bring it in. They wouldn't even do that. And they wouldn't even give me any food that they had fixed at the jail. And things just got from bad to worse, bad to worse. So I finally saw that I wasn't wanted, so I just quit. Well, that was after I went to the college prep program at the University of Evansville, where they used to send blind kids back in the 70s to see, you know, if they could hack it in college, because you took a couple of college courses in the summer quarter there. And I guess I did okay, and I was entered in a 2-year program, what was then Clark County Technical Institute. It's now Clark State College today. And I was in the law enforcement program, of course. And that didn't work out for me because I did not have any books. You know, back then, it was tough to get any books brailled. All the books I had, if I got them, were on open reel tape. And I just didn't get them. So I withdrew midterm, and in the meantime, my brother who lived here, my oldest brother who came down here many years ago, he was dying of brain cancer. And what we would do, we would send cassette tapes back and forth. And I just made the statement offhandedly, well, if you guys down there ever need a good dispatcher, you let me know. Well, I never thought anything about it, Jim. The state wanted me to go for vocational evaluation at Goodwill Industries in Dayton. And I told them that if I ever had a job, I was leaving, I was terminating myself. Here again, I was told I was being very immature, I was acting like a kid. Blind people just didn't do what I did. And I was being totally unrealistic. So, on the last Friday of June of '72, I just gotten home. And I got a call. My brother says, get your clothes packed. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, they're having a big celebration down here around the 4th of July, the sesquicentennial. And he and the mayor were good friends. My brother did electrical contracting for the city at that time. And he said, I told him about you, and he's interested. He says, you got the job if you want it. So I came down to Louisa, and he said, if nothing else, you might have fun for a week or two, and then you can go back and just chalk it up as an experience. Well, man, that's all I can think about. Man, a job that actually, you know, paid. Of course, I didn't realize a lot of the other things that went along with the job, like long hours and, oh, man, your relief not showing up. You had to stay. You couldn't leave. So that time went, and my brother said, well, you know, I'm sick and I'm dying. He said, I cannot rack you back and forth from town to 13 miles each way where I live. He said, we're going to have to find you a place here in town to live. And we looked at the paper, and there was a little mobile home for rent, just about like a travel trailer. And it was, he says, now, you know, this is with walking distance of your work. So you can learn how to walk there by yourself and back to work. You've got to be able to get back and forth by yourself. Which, of course, I knew. They taught that to us at Goodwill Industries in Dayton. Well, anyway, he said, but first we need to see if you got a job. So I went to the chief of police and I said, his name was Dempsey Bradley. And I said, Dempsey, you know, this thing's over. Do I go back to Springfield or do I stay? And he said, quote, hell no, Tom, you can't go. You got to stay. Of course, at that time, we were only getting paid $1 an hour was all we were getting. And later on, the pay went up in December to $1.50 an hour, and then as minimum wage went up, why, it went up. So that's how I came to Louisa. There are a lot of stories and things I've been involved with. The Great Fire in 1974 that I dispatched by myself. With no help when the town just about was leveled. And that's a summons substance of how that was, Jim. KC9VKV, K4LID.
Roger, Roger, Tom, KC9VKV. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I really wanted to check out a couple of things here. You, as you were in your amateur radio career in the beginning, had some kind of disastrous results with a power amplifier or linear that blew up or burned up in the house because of, was it bad tuning or what happened there?
It was a Heath VX20 transmitter, put out 35 watts. The antenna was poorly constructed, and I had no clue what I was doing.
Roger, and so the amplifier was running untuned or detuned, Roger?
Well, there was no amplifier, Jim. It was a novice transmitter. There was no amplifier.
Roger, I got you. But it did meet its demise, and the odor did linger in the household for a little while, Roger?
About a year, yes. Mom tried everything she could to get rid of it, but she couldn't get rid of it.
And, of course, she blamed you for that, Roger?
Well, she understood, so no, not really, but I always heard about it enough. Let's put it that way.
Yes, I think we all have our crosses to bear from our younger lives as fledgling electronic experts and making some decisions that in retrospect maybe we could have prevented if we had better knowledge of our situation, Roger.
Well, that's right, and I didn't know what I was doing, and you know, my brothers were all gone. There was just me and Mom. She said she was working. She didn't know. And I was literally on my own.
Roger. Well, Tom, I have enjoyed the Qso with you, sir, and if there's anything that you wanted to add that we haven't touched on, go ahead.
All right, well, I will tell you how I got back into ham radio.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, I was out of it until I came back to Kentucky. And I met a couple of hams here in town. One of them's a silent key now. And I asked him if there was any activity here in Louisa, and yeah, well, we get on now and then. And this other guy said, yeah, we want to put on a repeater here in Louisa, and we'd like you to be the control operator and monitor the thing, but you got to get your license. I said, man, I don't care nothing about amateur radio. It's stupid. I said, it's just an advanced form of CB is all it is. Well, a former policeman wanted me to teach him the code, so I did. And he took his code test and passed it. And I don't know if it was a mistake or not, but when the written came back, he got his test, and then there was an extra test. So my other buddy said, well, Tom, I got a test here. You might as well see if you can pass it and take it. So I did. And, okay, I got my call sign. My call sign at that time was WD4RWU, issued in 78. And so anyhow, I studied and got my tech ticket. And they put the repeater on the air. And I guess the rest is history. I upgraded and got my general back in 81. And I've been on HF pretty much since that time, Jim.
Roger. Tom, I've enjoyed speaking with you, and we're going to put this thing together. It probably is running long at the moment, so I'm going to have to do a little editing inside, but sure appreciate the story, man.
Well, I'm glad to do it. I really appreciate you asking me. And I've got more stories and things I could tell. I could tell you about the Great Fire of '74, and I could tell you about a guy from Murder Incorporated coming into town to try to kill somebody. Man, we got a lot of stuff that went on here back in the day.
Well, let's just mark this to be continued, Roger.
Well, we can do it, Jim. I've got a lot of stories I can tell you.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. KC9VKV.
Thank you, Jim. KC9VKV, K4LA.